Well, good morning, everybody. I think, in spite of that clock up there, I think it is 10 o'clock. So we'll make a start and say warm welcome to everybody. Welcome to this meeting of Hampshire Fire and Rescue Authority. I will start by saying what it says on my agenda here. The openness of local government bodies' regulations are in force, giving a legal right to members of the public to record, film, photograph and audio record and report on proceedings at meetings of the authority and its committees and or subcommittees. The authority has a protocol on filming, photographing and audio recording and reporting at public meetings of the authority, which is available on the website. At the start of the meeting, the chairman will make an announcement, which I am now, that the meeting may be recorded and reported. Anyone who remains at the meeting after this announcement will be deemed to have consented to the broadcast of their image and anything they may say. So, there you are. Yes. So, right. Turning to your... Oh, and we've also got a fire alarm coming, fire test coming at 11:30 this morning, which will last 1 minute. And we will remain here in the meeting unless advised otherwise. Please draw the microphone into yourself so we can all be heard, because I'm conscious of the fact that sometimes in the past you've not been able to hear me adequately. So can you all hear me? Yes. Good. Right, going to your agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Glenn, who is in New York. I think everybody else is here, are they not? They are. Welcome to Councillor Tig Outlaw from the Isle of Wight, representing the Isle of Wight. Also welcome to Enzo Riglia, representing Michael Lane, the PCC. You're both very welcome. Pleased to see you here this morning. Item 2 on your agenda, declarations of interest. Members, you're all very familiar with that. I don't think I need to read that paragraph out, but if you have any declaration that comes to your notice during the meeting, well, please let me know. So, moving on then to item 3, minutes of the meeting that was held on the 5th of June. Turn please to page 5. So taking these for accuracy, page 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 and 13. Are you all content that that's an accurate record of our meeting on that day? Everybody agree? Right, thank you. Now, matters arising, we will take a matter arising on page 7, on paragraph 189, review of trading company governance. A meeting of the new stakeholder committee occurred just yesterday here in this room. So I will invite the chairman of that committee, Councillor Price, to just briefly give us an update on what happened yesterday. So over to you, Roger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, as you rightly said, is that the committee met yesterday and we have agreed our constitution and the way forward and the separation which there is between the company, directors of the company and the committee and what the individual responsibilities are, which is very important. Also, we've agreed a way forward where the current directors will look at ways of finding the new directors, which will then be put before the committee to make the relevant appointments in the near future, hopefully. So it's all set up, now starting to take its way forward, and we will have that total segregation between the authority and the company. So, and the company is looking good. It's going forward. It's still looks very profitable, which is very important to the authority in our funding. So we were going to have 2 meetings a year, and with the ability to call extra meetings should they be needed. I suspect in this coming year we will certainly have more than 2 meetings, because there will be some issues which we will actually have to deal with. So it all looks good and going forward. So we're on the way. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Roger. Yeah, well, I was at the meeting as an observer, and yes, I completely agree with what you're saying. I think the prospects for the company do look good, and we're looking forward to hearing more about things as we move forward. So thank you for briefing the authority on that.
One thing I probably should have said is, of course, that once we have our meetings in the future, which will be getting reports from the directors, then that will be the interest and the meat of what we really need to know. That will get reported back to the authority through the minutes of that committee, coming as the Standard and Governance Committee minutes come to the authority at the moment. So it'll come in that same way, which will be able to sort of keep the authority informed of what's happening.
Indeed, we're sort of yet to establish the protocol for that, aren't we? But that is, as I understand it, that's the way it will happen in due course. Right, yes, thank you. Right, so item 4, deputations. Well, we don't have any. Item 5, chairman's announcements. Well, I apologise in advance because I do have a few things to say, but I'll try and get through them as quickly as I can. First of all, the Asian Fire Service Association conference occurred on between the 12th and the 14th of June. This was held at the McDonald's Botley Hotel, just locally here. Hampshire has a long history of supporting the AFSA and its vision in equality and fairness. The event was full of inspirational people who shared their experiences, which was both enjoyable and informative. The atmosphere and content and message of this event were perfect, and it was a valuable experience, and we continually strive to do things better. It was actually, in my opinion, an excellent event. It was much smaller than other events that I've been to, and it enabled me, and indeed the Vice Chairman was also there, to engage with people who were there. Among the speakers was John Barnes, the hero of our Deputy Chief. I'd also like to acknowledge and pay tribute to Delvinda Ray, our local firefighter, who became chairman at that event of the Asian Fire Service Association. And also, in saying that, I think I should acknowledge that, rather sadly, Dal's family have recently suffered a real personal tragedy. But it was an excellent event. Moving on, whole-time firefighter recruitment. Our new whole-time firefighter trainees have begun their initial 16-week training course here in the Academy. 20 trainees are currently undertaking a combination of classroom and practical learning to ensure they are provided with the skills and acknowledged to deliver effective support to our communities. I'm looking to Stu Adamson there. Are you able to give us a breakdown between that 20 of male and female potential recruits? Or is it Shantha? Do we know?
Yeah,
sorry to put you on the spot there.
So, yeah, those recruits have just started, so they're on their journey through their recruits. So there's 7 female firefighters, and the rest are made up of male firefighters on that course. It's a good mix, and a good mix of people from very different backgrounds across the board, and I've spent a bit of time talking with them, as I know colleagues, operational colleagues have done so it's good.
Well, that is excellent news, because I seem to remember in the past it's been about 1 female firefighter, hasn't it? So 7 out of 20 that's progress. Yes. Can I also put you on the spot and ask about the ethnic background and whether that is in there as well, or are you not sure?
No, I haven't got I've not got the total figures. I do know that there's quite a mix of different people from different backgrounds. So we've got some people from the armed forces who've transferred across or moved in. We've also got a jazz singer who's joined the course, an Irish dancer. So lots of different backgrounds. So yeah, should be good for our stations and good for our watches.
Right, so Ridian just mentioned the passing out parade, which I think is on the 11th of October. So we'll all look forward to that then. Good, right. Okay, right, so Combined Fire Authority update. Well, now, I think I owe you an apology here for, there just was not time for me to communicate with you because information came through last week at fairly short notice, and I think we agree. I have a statement here that I'll read out to you. I think we agreed that we didn't need to say anything, but then the Isle of Wight decided to release a press release, which some of you will have seen just suddenly popped up on the local television news. And I think it would have been better if it didn't need to be there. So bear with me while I need to read this out to you so you're familiar with what the situation is. The Chief Fire Officer has ensured that the HFRA is regularly updated on the progress of the submission to the Home Secretary to bring Hampshire and the Isle of Wight together under a new combined fire authority. You'll be aware that the Home Office requested some additional detail to that submission, which has been completed and returned to the Home Office as a formal resubmission to the Home Secretary on the 10th of July. As part of this process, our officers met with officials from the Home Office and they subsequently confirmed to us in writing that the original expected incorporation date of April 2020 is no longer possible. We have been advised that there is a revised anticipated date for full incorporation of April 21, allowing for the council tax setting cycle in 2021. This change was not the direct result of the request for additional details, but due to wider factors within the Home Office, including available policy and legal resources being used in wider Brexit preparations. The new timeframe does not affect the strategic decision made by the two authorities to create a new CFA. Officers remain totally focused on delivering this important initiative. The new shadow board will be established in April 20, bringing the two services together under the guidance of the new board to the point where a new CFA is incorporated. The additional 12 months that this will provide will allow officers to more closely align our services in advance of the CFA going live than was otherwise going to be possible under the original timeline. Of course, whilst there are other extraneous factors that could affect the work being completed within the Home Office, their officials have indicated that they would seek to support and enable the progress of our submission. Whilst this delay is frustrating, for all it is important that we maintain the integrity of the business case and therefore the assets, resources and funding that we will be transferring to the new CFA, which are the basis of the case we have made to the Home Secretary. Officers are now reviewing the arrangements and steps that are needed to meet this new timeline, and the Chief Officer will continually keep us informed of progress. So there we are. I found that incredibly frustrating. That it's nothing to do with us or indeed the Isle of Wight. It's all down to the Home Office. We are where we are, and there's nothing we can do about it. So, sorry, I couldn't advise you in advance of that going out on television, but I would have wished to. Right. So, moving on with other matters. Some of us were at the LGA conference just recently. This was held in Bournemouth. It wasn't really focused on fire very much. all I did see there was a company, and I can't remember their name, who were displaying new fire doors, so I had a little chat with them. But there wasn't, those of us, well, we all actually serve on other authorities, so it was more focused on other things, which is relevant to us. For me personally, I think the most value I got out of it was meeting MOD personnel from the Armed Forces Covenant. I made some good contacts there, and I will in due course follow that up and hope that something will come from that. It was a good event, I suppose, to meet with other people, but there wasn't an awful lot from a fire perspective. Moving on quickly, cadets have been established. The vice chairman was here at Eastleigh on Monday to watch a cadets parade. Ros and I will be in Gosport this evening to watch something similar. So that is that is moving forward. In due course, we will have a cadet event when the Lord Lieutenant will attend. I think that's likely to be next year now, isn't it? Well, is it? Will it be? I think it probably will be. Yes. But the Lord Lieutenant is indeed very interested in our cadets and wishes to give us every support. Moving on, the Chief Officer and I attended a meeting on Monday at LGA in Smith Square to talk. It was an NJC meeting to talk about the ongoing saga of the pay situation. You'll be familiar with the fact that the unions have submitted a pay request for a 17% pay rise relating to review of the firefighters' role. We've been going to discussions for about more than 2 years, actually, or might even be 3. It's been going on a very long time. There doesn't seem to be any way forward. We're in total impasse as far as I can see. But there was a consensus at the meeting that most fire authorities, well, I think all fire authorities have budgeted for 2% rise. So there was consensus at the meeting that should be considered. Another meeting took place yesterday in Manchester, and probably the same decision may have been taken. That would be a pay rise from the 1st of July this year. So we'll have to see what happens. I think the NJC will, in due course, make that decision that there will be an interim payment of 2%. But the ongoing demand for something much greater relating to the future role of firefighters, that will remain. Whether something happens when we have a new government and a new Prime Minister and perhaps a new Fire Minister, I don't know, but we'll watch that space, I think, as far as that is concerned. Right, so, and the final thing, going back to what I said right at the outset, Asian Fire Service Conference, that took place early in June, or no, actually middle of June. On the final day, 14th of June, I couldn't be there for that event because I was back here, out the front there, on parade. Well, I stood there beside the chief and the other officers to say final goodbye to Andy Bowers, because that was his final day where he marched off the premises. So I thought it important that I was there for that, to represent the authority. And in saying a final farewell today to Andy, I would like to acknowledge Howard Watts, who leaves us in August on promotion. Remind me where he's going?
To Staffordshire.
Howard is going to Staffordshire to become
One of the directors, essentially
an ACO.
Yeah.
Right. So, okay. So Howard leaves us on promotion. We're always sad to lose our excellent staff, but I've many times I've said I regard us like Manchester United or something like that. We train up these people and they go around the country. Howard, of course, has done exceptionally well on the island for a couple of years now, I think, hasn't he? So, in saying that, Howard will leave us with our best wishes, and we thank him for all that he's done for Hampshire and of course the island. Okay, sorry that went on a bit, but there's some important things there. Now, moving on to item 6, which is member development and comments. So, anybody got anything they would wish to tell us about? Anybody been?
I'm going. I'm going next week to the Prince's Trust final presentations in Basingstoke. I went last year, and it is extraordinarily emotional to see these young people actually drag themselves up from nothing into something really quite impressive.
Thank you for that, Ridian. Yes, did you want to add to that? Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to thank the Eastleigh Fire Cadets for allowing me to come and visit them on Monday. It was a wonderful experience watching them do their drills, and after just being established as a group for 6 weeks, they are amazing young people. And I want to thank the volunteers as well, who are really making it happen, and the whole team behind them as well. It really is well worth going to have a look at to see what they're doing.
Thank you for that. Yes, I would agree entirely with that, and we're going to go to Gosport this evening and hopefully see something similar. And I believe we may meet somebody who was given a real hard time to become a volunteer with Gosport. Just going back to what Ridian was saying, you have the up-to-date diary dates before you, and you've got their Prince's Trust in Rushmore, Basingstoke, and Southampton, all occurring on the same day. I don't think I'm able to go to Southampton. I think I'm somewhere else on that day. But I would commend it to you. What Ridian was saying is so true. I've been to a number of these events, and they are, well, they're really, well, tears flow on some of them, don't they? They really do. So if any of you are able to attend on that day, well, please. Sorry? Did you want to come in on that, David?
Not on that particular item, but on the development.
Okay, well, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of things. We had another on-call meeting here at the end of June. Delighted that the Deputy Chief Fire Officer, Steve Apter, was there, along with a great many people from around the county that represent on-call. One of the things we have asked them is, if we're not making a difference, tell us. We need to know that we're actually making a difference in the changes we're putting forward, because otherwise, like we're going to see later on the small fire, we need to change direction. So that's something which came across. It was very positive there, and I think, but we're waiting for them to come back, because I told, go away, think about this, talk to others, are we making a difference? It seems that morale is lifting. I'm looking at the chief officers over there, but I believe we're making a difference there. And the next thing is, I'd like to pay tribute to Danny Randall, who's the watch manager at Yateley, retiring after 39 years, much to his dismay, but ill health has caused it. He's been a tremendous asset to Yateley ever since the church burnt down, and we managed to talk the fire brigade into giving us a fire station as a result. So Danny's a wonderful man locally, great community guy, as so many on-call firefighters are. You'll notice he's been there 39 years. On-call tend to be here a lot longer than the full-time, because they'll start and they'll go on until literally their health says you can't do any more. So 40 years is normal. They'll quite happily carry on until they can't. So thank you.
Well, thank you for reminding me of that, David. I did get a letter from, email from Danny, and I wrote back to him telling him that I could actually recall that fire because I was working just down the road in Blackwater at that time. And whilst I didn't know at the time that it led to the establishment of the new fire station, I do remember the fire because it had the impact on some of my customers. I'm not quite sure what's happening with Danny's retirement. Is there going to be anything?
As I understand it, and thank you, Chairman, and thanks for your comments about Danny, because I also had a lovely note from Danny, and I've responded also. But I think he's keen to have a quiet do locally, and we'll respect those wishes. But we've sent our best to him.
Right, okay, because we did say we'd go up there if it was an event, but he's having a private event. That's fine. Good. Okay, anybody got anything else? Roger, yes.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. You've already mentioned about the local government conference, and I was also there as well. From my point of view, I think it was a very lacklustre conference in the sense that one of the ministers didn't turn up for one of the sessions, and also the civil servants were in a very difficult position because they don't know what's happening in the future, with what direction they're going to be going in with a change of Prime Minister, and until that happens. And again, it's to me, it just seemed there was no real get up and go with the conference. It didn't have that sparkle it usually has. To me, it didn't anyway. But it was interesting to look at some of the stalls. It was interesting to hear some of the speakers. And actually, I think the best day was the last day when we had some very good speakers on the last day in the conference hall. And I thought that was personally the best day of the conference. So going on to the other item I wanted to mention was pensions. Pensions certainly are very much a problem for everybody, I think, of what's going to be happening from the authority point of view of the costs, which have still not been sorted out. We're still waiting to hear whether the government is going to have a financial review for 1 year, or whether it's going to be a 4-year review or 3-year review. And if they're going to, having sort of agreed to pay 95% of our extra costs this year, whether they're going to do that for next year. We still had no confirmation of that. If there's a 1-year financial review, hopefully that will actually happen, and then it will get built into the future. There's that problem to be resolved, and there's also the current court case, which needs to be sorted out, and what the effect that's going to have on us as well. But that one is going to be, I think, a couple of years before we actually get any real indication of what costs are likely to be to us. So there's an awful lot going on in the background on pensions, which can have quite drastic financial implications to this authority if they go in certain ways.
Yes, I agree. You referred to the McLeod report. I have, under the next item, I have asked Rob Card just to give us a brief synopsis of what the position is with that. But it, yes, doesn't look very good going forward.
Thank you. Couple of things. Last Saturday, I went to the Southampton Mela, visited...
You haven't got your earrings on today.
I got these ones as well.
No, the big one. Oh, they came from there as well.
Oh, yes,
oh, right.
yes. I was wearing outrageous earrings yesterday, by the way. Yes, so I went to that and saw that the fire truck from St Mary's was very busy. There were lots of young people who wanted to climb on board, etc. So that was great. I'm also going to be going to the Princess Trust presentation in our Mayor's Parlour in Southampton next week. I always really enjoy those because the young people who go through the programme face significant challenges, and the fact that they see it through it's always really worthwhile. Thank you.
Good, yes, thank you. Well, that really does endorse the fact that these Princess Trust presentations are incredibly moving. And some of those young people have to try so hard to actually get through that. And it's all part of their sort of learning process. And it does enable me to acknowledge the support that we do give them, the trainers who do work really hard to assist in that process. Right.
I've noticed over the years, the first Princess Trust one I went to was in a hall. They're now in the Mayor's Parlour. It has been recognised how important they are and just how much it means to the young people involved, that they've moved from a hall somewhere in Farnborough into the council chambers. I think it's being recognised more and more that this is important work the fire service is doing with young people via the Princess Trust.
Yes, it's interesting that you say that, David, because I'm looking here at Southampton, which is on the 26th of July, Mayor's Parlour, Southampton, where I have been there. But I can recall in the past going to St Mary's Football Club for Princess Trust, which was fine, but it doesn't have the same status as the Mayor's Parlour. And if I'd been a young person, I think I would have felt much more important in the Mayor's Parlour than in Southampton. I might have enjoyed being in Southampton Football Club, but that is, it ups the status of it, doesn't it? Yes, it does. It does. Yeah. So that's excellent.
Point is that in some ways, some of the youngsters might very much well enjoy being at the football stadium, and particularly if there's any of the well-known footballers around there, rather than in the Mayor's Parlour. I agree personally the Mayor's Parlour is the right place, but thinking of the youngsters, some of them might quite like to be in the football stadium because that would be more akin to their lifestyle than the Mayor's Parlour.
That is another viewpoint. I accept that. Okay. Right. Anybody else got any other comments? No? Right. So we move on then, please. Turn, please, on your report to page 15, which is an excellent report. So I will commend Rob Carr in advance for his excellent report. And over to you, Rob, and you will just, as I've indicated, just give us a brief overview of this McLeod judgment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just picking up on the pension issue, so as Councillor Price says, there are effectively two that are going at the moment. So you've got the change to the discount rate, which added £3.7 million to our budget in the current financial year, which the government are funding 95%. As Councillor Price says, what we don't know is what the future funding arrangements will be. Almost certainly we would expect to have a one-year financial settlement for 2021, so we would hope that they would at least continue that funding. And then more recently, the McLeod judgment, so I did send a note round to members. So effectively what's happened is the Court of Appeal have ruled that the transitional protection arrangements that were put in place were discriminatory and therefore illegal. The government sought to appeal against that decision to the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court said that they had not raised a valid point of law, which I thought was quite interesting, and therefore said that they were unable to appeal. So what happens with that now is it will go back to the Employment Tribunal for a remedy. As yet, we have no idea how long that remedy will take. I suspect it will be a long time because of the significant implications of it. Just to give you a bit of an update, so within our accounts for last year, we had put in what's called a contingent liability, which says we think there will be an issue here which will affect us in the future, but we have no possible way of calculating what that will be. The auditors have said, no, that wasn't acceptable, you need to come up with something, and we said that's not possible, and then very helpfully the Government Actuaries Department did come up with some proposals in terms of assumptions as to what the impact could be, and then if, in effect, we've all used those to come up with the liability to put into our accounts. So for Hampshire Fire and Rescue Authority, the total liability of both LGPS and the firefighter schemes is about 30 million in terms of additional liability, which I have to say, actually, I was a bit surprised it was that low. I would have expected it to have been higher, but it will be some time before we know what the actual remedy will be, which then potentially will have implications for the 2015 firefighter scheme that was put in place. So really, yeah, awful lot going on in pensions, and we know not where that will end up. So just turn to the report. It's only got a few bits to pick out. So overall, within the revenue budget, we had an underspend of £3.1 million. Just wanted to put that in context. So in paragraph 5, we've tried to break that down between early achievement of savings. So the full SDR savings weren't due to come in until the current financial year, 1920, but we delivered early on those. So £1.5 million of that underspend relates to that. We had excess pay and inflation provisions within the budget. So again, it's not an underspend, it's just an over provision of budget of £1.1 million. And the true net underspend there, you'll see, is just under £500,000. So I think that helps to put that fairly large figure into context. And you probably expect to see that sort of position given the amount of money we've taken out of the budget over the years. So just turning to paragraph 14 in terms of capital. So we spent £5.2 million in the year on capital schemes. And then in paragraph 15, that shows you the financing of that. I think what's interesting about that table, you will see that of the 5.2 million, 3.2 million of the funding comes from the capital payments reserve. So that's the money that we put into capital from the revenue budget every year. Clearly, if we didn't have that, we would be severely constrained on the sort of capital investment that we could do. So the fact that we've been able to put £4 million into the budget means we've got a fairly healthy capital programme. We've raised this as a national issue because other fire authorities who are struggling with austerity may not have that ability to put revenue contributions to capital, and therefore that's bound to be having an impact on their capital investment priorities. Paragraph 22, it just talks about the Treasury Management Outturn Report, which the authority is required to approve each year, and that's always the complicated one in Appendix F. And then finally, paragraph 25 just gives you a breakdown of the reserves position. Again, quite interesting to note, we started the year with £30.3 million worth of reserves, and we ended the year with £30.4 million worth of reserves. So it might look like we've not moved a lot, but actually we have used £7.7 million during the year, but we've been able to top that back up during the year, which keeps us in a very healthy position. Happy to take any questions, Chairman.
Councillor Simpson.
A few, if I may, Mr. Chairman, thank you. On paragraph 9, the second line caused me some concern. This has been caused by the high level of reactive maintenance. I thought we had planned maintenance, not high, especially not a high level. Obviously, we're always going to get some.
So we have put in a programme of planned maintenance in order to try to reduce the level of reactive maintenance, but ultimately we will always have a certain level of reactive maintenance each year. And if anything, what's happened in previous years is that I think the budget hasn't been sufficient to cope with the level of normal activity that we would have on reactive maintenance. So over the longer term, we would hope to reduce that figure, but at the moment, the normal annual level of reactive maintenance is higher than the budget, which we have put right in the 1920 budget. It was something that we've increased to match the activity.
Thank you for that. Next is on number 19. If the contractors have messed up the drainage, why do we have to pay the professional fees?
It's a very good question. I think it's down to, so we don't have a clear answer to that yet. So some of the professional fees we might be liable for if there were decisions or slowdowns on, say, our side for whatever reason, or through consultants that we've appointed. So in this case, Hampshire County Council's design teams, which we might then be liable for. However, there's about £160,000 being held back from Kia for them to put right many of the issues. The actual cost will be higher, which will entirely be Kia's
cost. So for us, we're anticipating there might be some minor fees for that. Equally, we pay for a project manager to work on our side because we don't have the in-house skills. So obviously retaining that person beyond their time doesn't incur a cost. At this point, there's negotiations with Kia on how much of that we can reclaim. So at the moment, we're not sure, and we don't know what the end figures look like, which is why it's quite rightly noted in here. But absolutely, Kia have got a higher liability than we do.
Thank you for that. And the final one, if I may, Rob, is on paragraph 20, which I didn't quite understand. It seemed to me to be a contra in that we've got money in one year and it's going into the next year. But I thought I'd ask for clarification just to make sure I've got it right.
Thanks for that one. Yep. So paragraph 20, if we gave you the full explanation, would be about 2 pages. But trying to boil it down. So in effect, Hampshire Constabulary bought the furniture and equipment and were due to charge that to the project. Unfortunately, that got forgotten. So when we were doing the end of phase 1, we looked at the budget, we looked at what we'd spent, and we thought we'd done really well. In effect, we had some spare money. That spare money was then put into phase 2. What was missing was, in effect, the invoice for this £260,000 worth of equipment. So had we have spotted that at the time, we'd have known that we needed to build that into phase 2, which we didn't. So it's basically the police finance team and the fire finance team not speaking to each other. So either way, it's my fault because I run both of them. So it is an oversight. It is a mistake. Had we have known that at the time, we would have effectively approved more money for phase 2. But the fact that we didn't, effectively, this is coming through as an overspend. I don't know if that's any clearer than the paragraph.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else with any questions or comments? Yes.
Mr. Chairman, before we actually come to the recommendations, because within the recommendation 36, it talks about Appendix C. I'm assuming that Appendix C is pages 24 and 25, because in the pack, we don't actually have a pages and a D.
It must be 25.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm, because as it's not headed up, I don't want us to be saying, approving something which we don't.
Thank you. Yes, it's 25, yes. Yeah. So on page 25, can you please annotate C? Thank you. Right, there's no other comment. Can I take you to page 19 then? I will read out the recommendations. 35, the accounts for 2018-19, including the use of reserves set out in paragraph 25 and Appendix E of this report, be approved by Hampshire Fire Rescue Authority. 36, the changes to the capital payment reserve in 2018-19 and the impact on the capital spend profile going forward. Hear me all there. Turning now to page 41, which is the frontline capability review, and this leads it completely on from the risk review that occurred in 2016, well actually before 2016, but the consultation events took place in 2016, and I can recall going to many of those where we were constantly saying to firefighters, your views are important and we will listen to your decisions and take account of what you tell us. So I think this report does exactly that. So who's prepared to? Stu.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. So many of you will remember the risk review of 2016, which had at its core a 3-vehicle strategy, which was an enhanced vehicle, which was the large rescue pump that we already had in service, and then 2 proposed new vehicles. One was an intermediate vehicle and one was a first response vehicle. So in essence, small, medium and large. We had some planning assumptions, mainly around making sure we resource to risk. We also used the newest technology, and we were able to consistently be able to fight fires in buildings. So our core purpose, at its heart. So we went into a period of design, which included all of our staff, and we encouraged as many staff to get involved all the way through the design. And then we went into the evaluation, and the evaluation encompassed some 70-odd questions around the vehicles, around the capabilities, and again, that was involving our staff at all times. So in summary, the intermediate had a strong performance. It works really well for our crews and allows them to respond to a whole host of incidents, and gives us the additional benefit of being able to mobilise with a variable crew. So it can crew from between 2 and 5 people. So it gives us some real flexibility and hits that bit around resourcing to risk. The first response capability was really difficult. It was really difficult to accommodate our planning assumptions, and we've not found a vehicle that works for us. And in the main, the weight and space available for the equipment that we need to fulfill our planning assumptions have been the real issues and tests for us. So the paper that you've got before you contains a proposal which is to change our strategy to a 2-vehicle strategy. So based on the evaluation of those vehicles, that we drop the first response capability. If you accept the proposal, we'll need to change the mix of where we put our appliances, and that's set out within the map, which is in Appendix A, and that's that disposition of an appliance map. The proposal also changes some of the capital requirements, and whilst in the long term the capital finances aren't significantly affected, there is an immediate pressure of 0.46 million additional capital that we would need immediately should the proposal be accepted. So I think in summary, I'm happy and quite proud to be able to present you with this change proposal, in the main because the design and evaluation work has been done completely in conjunction with staff, and we've learned a lot from this work, and therefore I have real total confidence in this proposal that I put before you. Happy to answer any questions, Chairman.
Thank you. Thanks, Chairman. Personally, I'm very pleased that we've come up with a solution of only 2 vehicles. I think that when the suggestion was originally to have the 3, is that there was a lot of comments from the firefighters about a small unit. And when you look at sort of the majority of the small units were going into retained stations, and that did give them the ability to actually, with 2 riders, to attend, rather than seeing an appliance go past their station because they had a big appliance and they couldn't use that with only 2 firefighters. So I'm very pleased that we've actually sort of tested out the system and found that it, I have to say, it doesn't work. And we're now going to go to having just the 2 appliances, because I think that a lot of the firefighters who said in the very beginning that the small appliances wouldn't work for us will now say that very pleased that we've gone back to having just the 2. And they will be pleased, I think, mainly for one reason, that we've tested it and we've found that it doesn't work through the comments that have come back from the firefighters, and therefore we do take notice of what the firefighters say. And that is the important issue, to go back to that they take the message on, that we do have ideas of what, or the service has ideas of what should happen. We trial them, and if they don't work, we do take notice, and it is true consultation. It's not a consultation with a closed mind, because that is the worst thing. And this isn't the only situation where we've trialed things and found that it doesn't work, and we have taken note of what firefighters have said, and change things along the line. I think this is probably the second or the third situation. So I hope that our firefighters will actually take on board is that whatever it comes forward in a consultation document is pure consultation. And if there is a good reason not to go with it, then we will change. And I think that's a good message to be sending out to our firefighters. So I'm very happy to support the recommendations in here.
Thank you for that. Anybody else? Sharon, yes?
Just very briefly, I was at a service management visit at Hightown, and they'd had one of the first response capability had sort of had some issues, and they were sort of having quite a moan about it. So I think it's very much welcome that, you know, we've tried this out, it hasn't worked, so going to the 2-vehicle strategy instead, I think, is great. And I also know that we've had a intermediate capability at St Mary's, and they really do like it very much indeed. So, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Sharon. Yes, I have been to St Mary's and I've seen the intermediate vehicle there, and you're right, they do like it. I was down at Gosport some time back now when the small vehicle arrived, and I went down there to see it, and it was already parked up away because it had fallen over before I could get there to see it, actually. It was just, it's to do with the chassis, isn't it? It was just not enough chassis capacity to carry what we wanted to put on the vehicle. So, okay, right, let me draw your attention to page 47, the recommendations. And I'm going to read all this out because specific fire stations are mentioned here. So, para 45, that Hampshire Fire and Rescue Authority approve option B, a revised 2-vehicle approach is taken and a new disposition of appliances plan is approved. This will match resources to risk with the knowledge that HFRS has in 2019. So, para 46, that a revised disposition as detailed in Appendix A, resulting in EC, IC and SFVs being approved by Hampshire Fire Rescue Authority. So, A, change from an FRC to an IC for RDS single vehicle stations. B, change from an FRC to an IC for RDS 2 appliance stations. C, change from an FRC to an IC for Andover, Winchester, Gosport, Havant and Fareham. D, change from an FRC to an IC at Hightown and Rushmore. E, change from an EC to an IC at SHQ and Basingstoke to better match resources to risk. F, swap the EC allocated to Lyndhurst with the IC allocated to New Milton to better match resources to risk. And finally, G, the addition of a UHPL and MPN enabled SFV at Redbridge. We haven't mentioned that, yes. Did we? Just briefly explain.
So one of the planning assumptions was around new technology and having UHPL, so ultra high pressure lance capability at every station. So the only station which presents us with a problem with this change is Redbridge, which doesn't have, because of the resource, matching the risk and resources doesn't have that capability currently because it has a large vehicle which doesn't have UHPL. So the proposal is to put that specific bit of kit into one of the appliances that are operating out of Redbridge. So then that completes across the board all of our planning assumptions that we go right the way back to in risk review.
Right, thank you for that clarification. Members, you're all happy with that? Yes, sorry to interrupt the recommendations there, but that was important. Right, so we've completed 46. So 47, subject to the approval of the revised disposition of appliances, that an additional 0.462 million is added to the capital programme over the next 3 years to be funded from the Capital Payments Reserve. Right, members, you all content with those recommendations? Sorry, where are you? Oh, back to you, Stu.
Do you know what? I can't remember what it stands for. It's a something pressure nozzle. It's basically, it allows us to drill through a wall. So I can't remember what it stands for, so apologies for that.
I'm assuming you've agreed those recommendations before I spoke.
We've agreed those recommendations.
So I was so focused on MPN that I lost track of where we were. Members, thank you for those recommendations, and thank you, Stu and team, for the work they've done. Pay particular tribute to Mark Palmer, who leaves us this month as well, one of the group managers in that team, who I saw yesterday, who has done a great deal of work over the course of risk review and more recently in doing this evaluation. And what I'll say to you, and I think that Councillor Price's points earlier are well made, in as much as change is difficult for our staff, change is difficult for any staff, and you as councillors will be used to being lobbied, and our job as leaders is to determine which bits we're being lobbied over about his reluctance to change, and which bits are factual and actually pragmatic elements that our teams raise. I've been a firefighter, and I know I didn't like some changes that occurred to me when I was on fire stations and turned out to be exactly the right thing to do. Others I've campaigned against forever and weren't the right thing to do. So the leadership part of this for our team and myself is to determine the difference. Determine the difference of noise and concern about change from really important factors that people raise, which mean things won't work. And that is a difficult judgment to make. What I would say is we are listening, and thank you for your support in that regard, because I think some of our firefighters believe we'd never change our mind about this because we were so adamant that we wanted to try this. And I think it's testament to the team, to our openness, and our I suppose the maturity of our organisation is starting to build, in as much people are able to have those conversations and we're able to make those decisions and come to you with that recommendation. So thank you for supporting those. We'll make those happen now, and it's important that we communicate with our staff. I can hear a small cheer in the background from our staff. I know it'll be popular, but I'm also keen not just to be popular. My job is to lead this service in a way that it needs to be led. So thank you for the team and thank you for your support.
Good. Thank you very much for that. Okay, members. So that was a very important paper, which certainly moves the fire service forward in the way that we wish it to be moving. Right. So moving on, please, to agenda item 9, page 51, Ocado fire contributory factors. Well, this is an interim report, and Ocado have been in the news very recently, and we had to be prepared in case, well, we were asked something, and indeed whether I was asked something. If I was asked by the press, all I would have, and I haven't been asked, all I would have said was that this, in my opinion, was the most significant fire that had occurred in Hampshire, most dangerous fire that occurred in Hampshire since Shirley Towers, and that I would have sought to really commend the actions of our firefighters on that night. You have the report. I did specifically ask that our sprinkler statement be included in the report. You'll note that that's dated September 2012. It follows on from Shirley Towers. We were very much in the vanguard with a sprinkler policy. I would commend that document to you. It is a policy document. I'm sure it's still available, but if you're not retaining your copy of this agenda, please retain that that document. We will be discussing it further in due course, obviously. So I'll now hand over to Shantha, please, for any other comment on Ocado.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So why have we taken the step of reporting around the contributory factors of the fire? So this clearly was a devastating fire, and the reason for its dramatic escalation were beyond the capabilities of the Fire and Rescue Service. And there's also a current public discourse about how buildings are constructed, used and regulated. The fire wasn't normal due to the size and scale of it. As you're well aware, we had several hundred firefighters and support staff, several fire and rescue services also contributing their resources to support us. And of course, it took place over 4 days. So really unprecedented in Hampshire fire and rescue's experience, and indeed the sectors. And of course, the other aspect which is new was the technology which was within the building, which is described within the report itself. So what you have in front of you is an interim report. I will be bringing a full report into the next authority meeting, which focuses in more detail also on all of the learning that we've extracted from this. There is some analysis within this report. What I would, before I go into a presentation of the report, want to draw members' attention to, since the publication of our report on ModGov, we were contacted by Ocado's insurers, FM Global. So there's a minor factual correction that I would like to offer up, and it will be recorded in the minutes, which is if you turn to paragraph 12, the second sentence currently reads, "It also had a sprinkler system designed by the buildings insurers FM Global." What has been suggested by FM Global is a correction to say it also had a sprinkler system specified by the buildings insurer FM Global to suppress a fire and hold it in check prior to the arrival of the fire and rescue service. So just a minor wording change, that it was specified rather than designed by the insurers. So I'll now go on to the report before I have an opportunity to take any questions from yourselves. So clearly the response to the fire showed, as the Chairman's mentioned, the dedication and professionalism of our crews, support staff, and all of our partner agencies within the Local Resilience Forum. It was a large-scale multi-agency response, and the success was in that we were able to return the community and the surrounding businesses to a new normality, and of course no one was injured through that. As a service with a learning culture, it's really important that we have a critical review, that we're able to bring out any lessons for the future for ourselves, and also that the learning we can get from this contributes to the sector, because of course as new technology evolves, there's going to be new challenges and risks that all fire and rescue services will need to plan for within their local areas. So talking a little bit about the timeline around the fire ignition, growth and development, just to, again, just draw out some points from the report. So the ignition was spotted through CCTV, and if you can imagine a web of honeycomb plastic several meters high and several meters deep, that was what our firefighters were ultimately faced with. It totally inaccessible for humans to access, and that really contributed to the fact that the fire right from the get-go was deep-seated and inaccessible. As it says within the report itself, we tried every operational tactic that we have at our disposal, and unfortunately none of those were successful in being able to reduce or successfully tackle the growth of the fire. The other facts that are illustrated within the report are, of course, the delay from the point of detection, then a further delay from the point of detection by Ocado staff to the 999 call being received here, and also the activity by Ocado staff with respect to deactivating the sprinkler. It's absolutely impossible to speculate what would have happened had the delay been shorter, had the sprinkler system not been deactivated by the staff. But what we can say is, of course, any fire that is tackled in its earlier stages is going to be smaller, and of course because of these actions, they contributed to the growth. The interim report that we have also published internally for our staff focuses very much on the operations, so on our command, on our leadership, and on our decision making at each of the three levels of operational, tactical, and strategic. And that, in turn, the material within that will contribute to the report you'll be receiving in September. I'd like to conclude by, before I take any questions, by mentioning the support that Ocado have given the service in conducting this review right from the outset, right from the time that our initial commanders were on the ground in Andover over those 4 days. Ocado representatives were there to assist us. There was consistent engagement to our firefighters, to our command teams there, and also Ocado were instrumental in supporting the local community, indeed in helping to get back to a new normality. The material that we have been afforded access to has assisted my team in the review, so I'm very grateful for that. And Ocado are clear about the learning that they've now embedded within their organisation as a result of this. So really there is an ongoing dialogue between ourselves and Ocado PLC. So I'm happy to take any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you. Ocado were actually on television, I think, last week or the week before. Do you think with them coming out onto the television was because they were aware that this report was coming here? Do you think that triggered them in going out and putting what was happening, what they wanted to get out into the media?
Really good question. So we've had constant and consistent dialogue with them, and one of the things that we were very clear with was informing them of the contents of our report, particularly the 2 points around the delay of the phone call and the actions that their staff took. So yes, it's possible, but we've had that constant dialogue.
The other point I would like to raise is about our own sprinkler position statement. That statement, as you rightly said at the beginning, was done in 2012. That's 7 years ago. A lot is changed in the sprinkler systems and also with high-rise and the Wales scenario. So I think that we ought to set up a subcommittee to re-look at our sprinkler policy. Do we want to keep it as it is? Do we want to change it? Is there a need to change it? Today isn't the time to debate whether we want to make any changes to it because it wouldn't get the justification that it needs. But I do believe that as it's now 7 years old, we ought to re-look at it and see if it is still right for what's the purpose for what it is today. So I will want to, and I give notice that I will want to change the recommendation 47 when we get to it.
Right, well, thank you for that. I think this is something that, dealing with the sprinkler issue, I think this is something that we can take to APAG or to our away day. But actually, the sprinkler policy, although it doesn't say that on the document, the sprinkler policy did actually come before us for review. And you'll have to remind me, Chief Officer, when that was. Was that
I think it was
2017?
Yeah, it was 18 months ago, I think.
Yeah,
But we'll check the
it
dates.
we have already reviewed it, but that doesn't mean to say in the light of all this we shouldn't be looking at it again. But we have looked at it. It isn't 7 years old, although it doesn't actually say on the bottom of the page here reviewed and a date, which I think it should do. But it has been reviewed. Yes.
But I think the point's a good one because I think the government policy is seemingly moving on this. I think the question I would like to ask members to consider for APAG and maybe the away day is what further you'd have us do with your position statement in terms of lobbying or action with civil servants and ministers. So that's something we can certainly consider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may just answer, there's a couple of things here. The air sampling fire detection system paragraph 16 did not detect the fire. Do we know why? What went wrong? Was it just a mechanical fault or a design fault? And then why was the sprinkler system turned off? Is it because they thought the fire was out, which is a reasonable thing, or they thought they would be saving produce by turning the water sprinklers off, which would otherwise ruin them? And the other thing is, we've had problems in the past with automatic systems which tell us, but if you've got such a high level of robotic works going on, perhaps we should be saying to people, you need an automatic system which will tell us, so that it's no longer in the hands of a fallible human being. It would automatically go to the nearest fire station and we would be called out. It's just a thought.
Thank you for those questions. So taking them in turn then, we don't have the information as to why the air sampling detection system didn't detect the fire, but that is something that clearly there's a tremendous amount of technology, or at least there was in that building, that Ocado are conducting all kinds of research into that, because clearly they want to be assured around all of the different systems they put in place, because this model will be used in other warehouses. And indeed, there's a mirror site in Erith in Kent, which is very similar, so taking a real interest. So I don't have that information. With respect to the deactivation taken by their staff, clearly I can't comment on the actions of their staff, but having seen the ignition of the charging unit itself, where the electricity was arcing, as described in the report, what started off as effectively a flame of a birthday candle cake. That's the size it was. It is possible, but I couldn't possibly comment on, the actions of their staff. And yes, and then finally, just the sort of final point around the systems they place, as I've said, this is a technology company. It's not a grocery company. So I'm sure, and I know that they're conducting all kinds of research to ensure that all of their systems are as fit for purpose as possible.
Right, so anybody else, any other comment? Okay. Right, so I did say that the sprinkler statement has been reviewed, although I'd be more content in saying that to you if it had a review date on it, which it doesn't have. With regard to the recommendations, I'm minded to say that we alter that to say that the authority reaffirms and undertakes to review its position statement. Are you content with that?
I was going a little bit further. I wanted to actually set up a working group to review the sprinkler statement and come back with recommendations, whether it's fit for purpose, whether it needs to be changed or whatever. As I say, a lot of things has happened, and government is also, as the Chief said, is looking at all sorts of things. There's a whole raft of issues around that. When the original sprinkler systems report policy came in, sprinklers were different then to what they are today. You've got more misting systems, and there may be a different types of systems which are right for different sort of issues. So I think we need to really look at the whole thing as, have we got it right? Do we need to change it? I think our principles will probably stay about the same. I don't think we will change very much in our principles, and that we believe that there should be sprinklers. I mean, for instance, the one which I look at here is schools. I mean, government is moving, or appears to be moving, in the direction that in new schools that sprinklers should be fitted, whereas we have a differing view there. So yeah. I think that's why I think we need to really look at it.
Yes, I seem to recall that we did look at only briefly, the sprinkler policy when we had the working group that was set up immediately after the Grenfell tragedy. So we're talking about 2 years ago. I think that's when, you know, sort of you recall that there's been a review. I wouldn't say it was a review, it was just a quick look at, but...
I think at both points, what I'll be wary of is drawing conclusions from this report. So whilst I never think it's a bad thing to keep reviewing all of our policies, the danger is that on the basis of this report, we call for a review which would be completely wrong, because there's nothing, as it stands, the sprinkler position or policy from the authority has not impacted, wouldn't made no impact to this particular fire. So I accept both points, but there's something about being connected with this report. This recommendation is not, therefore, linked to the content of the report. That makes sense. So happy outside of this to a recommendation members to say, could you bring us something back on sprinklers and how we might move that position forward? I'm just wary about it connected with this report.
Can I just come back on that? I understand where the Chief is going in the sense of linking it to this report, but I do think that somehow or other, I mean, I'm just rereading. I mean, because we've linked our sprinkler report to this anyway, and probably it might have not been a good idea to have done so in the first place. But having said that, and I'm not being critical of anyone, is that it's already linked, and that's the problem. We've either got to de-link it somehow or other, and then bring it back as an issue which we want to relook at. So would it be better if that is the way, in delinking it, is just to have a recommendation that the contents of this report is noted by the authority and take out paragraph 47 in the recommendation, and then we have an item on the next APAG agenda of how we take forward a review of the sprinkler system. Not sprinkler system, sprinkler policy.
Okay. Right, I hear what you say, okay, I'm quite content with you criticising me for having this as an attachment. No, I know, because sprinklers are specifically referred to in this report, and at the last meeting, last authority meeting, I acknowledged what had happened in Canberra Towers with Southampton City installing sprinklers there, which contained a fire within one flat and made a significant difference. So sprinklers is an ongoing issue, and it is something that we, as I said earlier, we were very much in the vanguard and still remain so with regard to sprinkler policy. And I don't think we should lose track of that. We need to enforce it. That's the wrong word. We need to make yes, reinforce, yes. So okay, I don't mind if we take out 47 and then agree that we'll have our own private discussion reviewing our policy. What do members feel about that?
I think, Mr. Chairman, taking the point that the Chief made is that if I change that to what I would like to see a better review, then it links it to this report. And therefore, delinking it is what I would be satisfied with, is to take the sprinkler issue out totally altogether from the report, from the recommendation. And therefore, we're not linking it in any way at all. And then we do, through APAG, look at a way of reviewing it. And I think APAG's agenda should be about how do we review it.
Okay. Right. So that is a proposal that we remove 47. Are you in agreement with that? Yep. Right. So strike that from the recommendation. So 47 comes out, and at a future date, we will bring before APAG or perhaps our away day a more detailed discussion and we will remind ourselves about what we said 2 years ago with regard to sprinklers following Grenfell. Right, so, okay, so you're left with 46 then, which I'll read, that the contents of this report be noted by Hampshire Fire and Rescue Authority. Agreed? Okay, right. Yes, please do.
Thank you once again, members, and thank you, Shantha team, for the analysis that's been put in so far. As Shantha said, there'll be a further report on the learning from this incident, which there always inevitably is from large, or any incident actually come to that, across the Fire and Rescue Service. But make no bones about it, this is an internationally important fire. And as much as not only are the insurers FM Global, who are internationally well known as Arcado, interested in the outcomes of this, there also is much interest from the wider fire sector, hence wanting to report that early enough to make sure we were clear on some of the direction of travel here. I just want to pay tribute to our firefighting teams that through that long period worked so hard, and also to the Andover community who tolerated the impact on their town for such a long time over that period as well. So these things are never easy, but we're a big service. We're able to cope with those things, and I have to say that that particular fire stretched us, and we're starting to see this across the country now. Fires of this magnitude are stretching fire and rescue services beyond their capabilities. And I have to say, whenever you get a chief officer, as my first fire I've commanded as a chief fire officer, that's always a bad sign when there's a chief officer in charge, because it means your services are becoming stretched and we're having to step in if the chief or the dep are in command. So whilst I'm saying that, it was important that we allowed our team to recover and having clear decision-making capabilities is something which we recognised stretched Hampshire to its limits. I'm grateful to all those services that assisted us, but it's something the NFCC, National Fire Chiefs Council, continues to now campaign for in government circles, to understand that over the years fire services have got less and less resilient and less able to cope with long, protracted incidents like this. It's a real issue we need to keep flagged. Thankfully, it don't happen very often, but when they do, we have to be really, really careful that we can cope. So thank you for your support today in noting the early findings of this, and we hope that it will inform national policy as well as funding going forward. Thank you.
Good, right. Thank you for that. Very important comment there. Okay, moving on then, please, now to page 59, item 10. This is the minutes of the Extraordinary Standards and Governance Committee that was held on the 11th of June, and I turn to the chairman of that committee, please, to present these minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I present the minutes of the Extraordinary Standards and Governance meeting held on the 11th of June. I'm happy to take questions, although I think for this meeting there was an open invitation to all members of the Fire Authority to attend if they so wished. Thank you.
Any questions, members? No? Right, so you're all content with those minutes? Yes, I agreed. Agreed. Thank you. Moving to item... Sorry? Oh, right, proposed item 11, exclusion of the press and public. So, sorry, Enzo, you're leaving us. Thank you for attending.